And everybody, it is Drac in post editing. I just wanted to hop in here and say I suck at being a podcast producer. I did not get this episode edited and released on a timely manner after we recorded it last Sunday. So there has been some changes to the OGL landscape since we recorded this. The big news as of yesterday, Friday, January 27th, is they are leaving the OGL 1.A in place, as is untouched. They're also making the entire SRD 5.1 available under a Creative Commons license, so you choose which one you prefer to use. So yes, Wizards and Hasbro caved to the pressure that the community was putting on them and have backed down on all of this, scrapped plans for the new OGL. Everything for now is staying the same. We're going to do a follow-up episode to talk about what's going on with this change. I did want to release this episode, though, because I think the conversation that we had, it was a good conversation. It was very interesting. There was a lot of information proposed. But just keep in mind, all of the stuff that we're talking about the new OGL, that is now null and void, as they're not doing that. So I just wanted to add that in here. But as I said, I think the conversation we had was good, and it was worth releasing the episode. Once again, I apologize. I suck so bad and didn't get this edited and released on a timely manner. That is totally on me. Hey now, everybody, welcome to DDO Players News, where we normally take a look at DDO and the world of the tabletop. But today, it is all about the tabletop and all about that thing that everybody is talking about. So this is a little different episode for us. If you came here for some DDO content, this episode is not for you, because there is going to be none. This is all going to be about Hasbro, WOTC, and the OGL. I do have the perfect person to be with me. I have Evilbeeker back.
Yeah, back so soon.
You are. I told you I was going to have you back on, but I didn't realize it was going to be this soon. But
well, when
fine.
the world comes to an end, then I guess I'm the one that steps in.
Exactly. We've been talking, and I'm like, dude, you're just going to come on, and we're just going to cover this. So yeah. So this show, if you have been paid any attention to anything Dungeons and Dragons related in the past about month maybe or so, you've heard about this. So we're just going to get into it. What the heck is going on with this OGL stuff, and what does it mean, and what's going to happen, and what could happen, and all of that fun stuff. We're going to try to make sense of it all.
There's a lot to make sense of. And I think there's more going on than meets the eye. If you look at the large picture, which is kind of what I was trying to do here. Spoiler alert: there's 19 pages of notes.
Yeah, this might be a long show
that I took for this. We probably won't read through everything verbatim, but a lot of stuff posted from news articles. Ian World is where I got a ton of information from. And if you've been paying attention to any of the major news organizations, the Washington Post has picked this up, the Guardian, Forbes, there's a whole list of them that are saying, hey, what is going on with Dungeons and Dragons? Well, to start this off, and Drac and I talked, first of all, Drac and I talked about this for 2 weeks almost before we decided to
at least, yeah.
It was like, do we want to get involved in this? Do we want to say anything about this? Because but I want to actually, Jack, I want to say one thing right up front. You said this show isn't about Dungeons and Dragons. Boy, I sure hope it's not. And I'm just going to kind of leave that sitting out there to be discussed later.
Okay.
Because Dungeons and Dragons, or DDO Online, is a Dungeons and Dragons license. Is it subject to some of this stuff? Well, I guess that's up to people's interpretation.
It's true. As far as I know, and I was going to actually reach out to Jerry Cordovan for a statement if I could get it, and I forgot to do that. As far as I am aware, this should not affect their license that I know of, but I don't know that for sure. So I'm pretty sure the sky is not falling for DDO. I think we're fine with DDO. At least how I read things, but you can read this a lot. You basically have to have a legal degree to understand some of this stuff, as we'll get into.
That is true. And some of it's up to interpretation. Everybody has their own until it's all over, everybody has their own interpretation of what may or may not happen. So I thought it fun to start out as far as legal action and lawyers and quote unquote suing, which we'll get into a little bit later with the current stuff. But I thought I'd go back to the good old TSR years, and
which for you that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. Some of this I wasn't around for. So after, well, actually not after. It's probably when Gary was with the company, and then much more after. TSR did file a few lawsuits against a few different people for what we want to call product infringement or royalties for authors and things like that. I'm not going to go over the author ones. Mostly it's authors making noise because they thought they weren't being paid their royalties properly. I'm not going to delve into that. I'm going to kind of hit the more major ones here. So in 1984, Mayfair Games, if you remember Mayfair Games back in the day, they were the first to kind of poke the bear, as it were, and I'm reading that right off of Wikipedia here, to publish generic adventures for use with AD&D, with a product called the Roll Aids. Now, some of these products, I got a couple, Drac. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I have a couple of the Roll Aids. They were pretty good, actually.
The dwarf one was actually probably one of the more popular ones.
That's the one. I have that one, and I can't remember the other one I have. I'd have to dig it out the shelf over there, but yeah.
Yeah, and they said that they were suitable for Dungeons and Dragons. Well, that kind of caused TSR to jump in and say, hey, you can't do that. That's a copyrighted trademark of TSR. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, TSR gave Mayfair a royalty-free license to keep producing these products as long as the TSR trademark was on them. Okay, and fair enough. But then again, in 1991, they came back again and said, hey, you violated this agreement when you created the City States of the Invincible Overlord products. And I have one of those. I don't even have a collection of those. I don't know if you have any of those, Drake.
I do not know. I'm not even familiar. I mean, I know the name, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, they were small box sets. I mean, only like about an inch and a half box set.
Oh, okay.
And they contain maps of different cities and that you could use in your D&D game. And that was in 91. Now, by that time, Gary wasn't with the company at all. And he did some introductions in those products, and he, as the creator of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, well, there was a little bit of a fight over that.
I could see why, yeah.
Yep. And then after 2 years of legal battles, Mayfair had had enough, and they sold all the Roll Aid stuff to TSR and said, we're done. Which included 2 unpublished products called the Chronomancer and the Shaman, which TSR later released. And I remember those because I was there for that. So then that was the whole Mayfair Games thing. But let's take a step backwards. In 1987, New Infinities, that was the company that Gary started when he was ousted from TSR with the Gord the Rogue novels and the Cyborg Commando game. Now, I don't know if you ever saw a copy of Cyborg Commandos, Drac.
I have not. I've always wanted to.
Save yourself the trouble. you needed a PhD in mathematics to figure out that game.
Oh wow!
It was really complicated. It did not do well, and then the other thing was that Frank Menser, who went to New Infinities with Gary, wanted to create a line called the Fantasy Master generic role-playing game line. However, some of this material was stuff that Frank had written when he was with the RPGA. And there was it was supposed to be a verbal, yes, you can use this. And somebody stepped in and said, no, you can't, and blah, blah, blah. And then that all fizzled out. And then the next one, which also, again, involved Gary, was he went to a company called GDW. Now, GDW hasn't been around for many years, and that was because of this lawsuit. Well, Gary published a product he called Dangerous Dimensions, which TSR then stepped in again and said, hey, look, you can't do that because it's too similar to D&D. So they changed the name to Dangerous Journeys. But then TSR stepped in and said, nope, can't do that either. It's a derivative of AD&D. And I believe one of the thing was that Gary potentially worked on this when he was still at TSR. After several years of court proceedings, GDW finally gave up and they closed their shop, closed the doors 2 years later. I remember this because the day that all the Dangerous Journeys box sets arrived at TSR, everybody got one.
Oh, wow.
I don't have mine anymore. I sold it for an obscene amount of money.
I bet you probably did.
About 5 or 6 years later.
Because they go for obscene amount of money still. So yeah.
This after a lot of us were let go from TSR, a lot of us guys put ours up for sale, and I have no qualms about it. It would have been nice to have now just to look it over, but yeah. The last thing I'll mention about the TSR years was in 1994. So this is when TSR finally started doing Dungeons and Dragons more Dungeons and Dragons stuff online, and that was with AOL. We had there was a lot of us that had AOL accounts. I was TSR Kevin, there was TSR Jim, TSR Sean, TSR Bill. We went on and it was mostly all message boards and stuff like that. But remember, 1994, that's pretty early.
That's real early internet. So yeah, that's
and people were posting the logos, they were snipping content, and they were putting it. And I really felt bad at the time for Sean Reynolds. He was the guy Sean was originally hired at TSR to be their internet, to be the internet presence. Okay. And he took a lot of the brunt of this. A lot of fan material was, received cease and desist orders. And that's where the whole TSR with the $sign where the S's kind of came from. And it wasn't a good look, but remember, these were early internet years, I mean, there's no comparison to what it was back then to where it is today. I mean, it's crazy enough different that it's hard to imagine. So then WOTC TSR was purchased by Wizards of the Coast in mid to late 1997. And then in 1999, Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast from Peter Atkins, who was the original founder of Wizards of the Coast. I heard stories from my TSR comrades about when Ryan Dancy brought the idea of the OGL to the Wizards of the Coast group. Because Ryan had worked with Peter early on in the WOTC days and stuff like that. Now, when fun little fact, I think it's probably around 1994 and 1995. I remember that we used to have different groups at TSR. So we had the AD&D group, the Forgotten Realms group, and so on and so on. And our lawyer, whose name I won't mention, wonderful person. I just don't want to mention her because I don't want people messaging her. She came in and sat in each one of these meetings and talked to us all about internet or about copyright law. And we all got a crash course in what was good and what was bad based on the company's view of our copyright laws. So when Ryan Dancy brought all of this to the Wizards of the Coast staff, everybody from TSR stood up and said, "Hey, that's a bad idea," because that's what we were taught, right?
Right. The OGL was kind of something like that was thought about during the TSR days too.
Boy, we talked about it, about licensing.
I mean, not necessarily the OGL, but something.
No, it was more like
something like this, like a license for people to use.
It was basically licensing. Now, I'm going to be honest. Most of the licensing was focused on computer games and just weird stuff. I remember seeing a prototype for TSR or Dungeons and Dragons playing cards for Las Vegas casinos.
Really?
Yes. This was weird because, and if you look back in the history of TSR licensing, you'll find stuff like Big Wheels, and
they had a Dynasty game, for God's sakes.
They had an All My Children game too.
yes.
So which had nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons, but I mean, they just basically hired TSR to do a board game for them. But anyway, there's a lot of old TSR licensing out there. So thinking of us being only, we were the only person publishing Dungeons and Dragons, thinking, well, are there other companies that want to do this? we that idea was kind of poo-pooed, but then Ryan came along and he said, "Hey, look, this will open up D&D." So what you had was the OGL, which is the license, the public license to produce Dungeons and Dragons content, and then you had the SRD. Well, the SRD, or System Reference Document, that was the document that said, "Here's all the stuff in D&D that third-party publishers could use to create content." And it's evolved over the years. It started with this all started with third edition, or 3.5 third edition D&D. So you had this document that says, here's all the things you can put in your books about D&D. Now, everything wasn't there, but what they didn't want you doing is copying pasting like the Player's Handbook or the DMG. So this was the stuff that you could use. Everything else you had to, it had to be original content. And then the other thing that this did was it allowed WOTC to sell more of the core books. So the Player's Handbook, the DMG, the Monster Manual, the sales of those products just took off like crazy because you needed those products to play all these third-party games. And that's when things started to get a little. That was when the old Die 20 era kind of exploded. With that, and that was around 2000, 2001. In 2004, Wizards of the Coast addressed what would occur if the license was changed. Okay, and this is really important. The OGL already defines what will happen to content that has been previously distributed using an earlier version of the license. In Section 9, it says, as a result, even if Wizards made a change you disagreed with, you could continue to use an earlier acceptable version at your option. In other words, there was no reason for Wizards to ever make a change to the community of people using the open gaming license that changes that they would object to, because the community would just ignore the change anyway. That is huge. And
remember that later.
And yeah. Now, it's also important to note that up until a few months ago, this statement was on Wizards of the Coast website. And it was a static page, and then suddenly it disappeared.
I looked for it too, because I remember it being on the site, and I'm like, it's not there anymore.
If you search around, you can find the screenshots from it. That's because they are floating around right now.
The only way I found it was a screenshot. I even tried the Wayback Machine, and it wasn't on there anymore either.
Nope. If you go out, I think some guys in Ian World have it posted. It's just, yeah. So remember that point.
Exactly.
So then in 2008, somebody with a really bad idea came up with what's called the GSL, the Game System License, which was available for third-party developers to publish products compatible with 4th edition.
Ugh.
I know.
Also known on the show as the edition that shall not be named.
Right. Honestly, there was a couple of cool things that came out of 4th edition, but overall, it was outweighed by just the horrible
a few. But yes.
Very few.
Very, very few.
So the GSL was incompatible with the OGL. However, by its own terms, the OGL was irrevocable, so nobody really used the GSL. This is the point in time where this is what caused 4th edition, mostly caused 4th edition to fail, including the bad design play, was they were hoping that publishers would jump on board with this license, which was more restrictive, gave WOTC more control over it, and so that they could do products with the new quote unquote cool 4th edition. Well, the 4th edition kind of fell on its face. And people said, no, why do we need this when we can just keep using the OGL? This is what spawned companies like Pathfinder, or Paizo and Pathfinder, Cobalt Press, and Frog God Games, all these other companies that decided, well, I don't want to do this 4th edition. I'm gonna just come up with a variation of 3rd edition and publish those products. And that's when Paizo and Pathfinder and some of these other companies really took off and turned into huge companies, because they were producing the products that the majority of the game community wanted to see. And that made a huge difference. And then the GSL just slipped into oblivion, as it were. Then, as we go down the timeline, in 2016, Wizards of the Coast released 5th edition. When they did that, they created a new SRD that was compatible with the OGL. And when we say the OGL, we mean version 1.0A. Now, for historical purposes, there was a 1.0, but there was a piece of, there was some wording in 1.0 that conflicted something else, so they changed it. So that's where 1.A came from. In addition to the new SRD, the content creators can access an additional license option by publishing through the Dungeon Masters Guild, or as we've been calling it on the show, the DMs Guild. This allowed you, and I took advantage of this myself, this allows you to produce 5th edition content in copywritten intellectual property, such as Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, Eberron, Magic of the Gathering, all of those old, all the old licenses. However, Wizards was taking, and still is, taking a 50% cut of those proceeds. There's a way to get a cheaper rate. I never looked into it. I only have a couple of things on there, and I may mention that later. So that's kind of when the DMs Guild kind of took off. So that was kind of cool. So if you wanted to write a Ravenloft adventure or Eberron, or Forgotten Realms or something like that, or even the older stuff like Dark Sun or Spelljammer, you could do that through the DMs Guild. So that's kind of cool. All right, before we kind of jump forward quite a bit, Drac, is there anything else you want to jump in and add? I've been talking a little bit.
No, I think you covered it. I mean, that's like the whole history of it. So you kind of know where we were at. And then the whole world turned upside down.
Right.
And the internet set ablaze.
Yeah. So at this point in time, I think Wizards of the Coast decided to come up with a master plan. You know, some evil genius. I imagine, I envision Pinky in the Brain, sitting in the back corner somewhere. What are we going to do today, Brain? Well, Pinky, we're going to take over D&D.
Yes.
So in August of last year, Wizards of the Coast launched a public playtest of the next version of Dungeons & Dragons under the One D&D initiative. Okay. And then, and that's where, all the play testing, all the people, new version of D&D coming along. Very exciting. Very exciting. Now, in November, there was a report that the OGL would be discontinued or changed for this new iteration of Dungeons and Dragons, based on unconfirmed leaks. And keep in mind, you're going to hear the word leaks a lot going forward here. In response to that, Wizards did make a statement in November. We will continue to support the thousands of the creators making third-party D&D content with the release of One D&D in 2024. While it is certain our open gaming license will continue to evolve, just as it has since its inception, we're too early in the development of One D&D to give more specifics on the OGL or system reference document at this time. So, whoa. Continue to evolve? To me, that says, hey, we're going to change something.
Yeah, that's like, exactly. That's lawyer speak for, we're going to change this, but we're not telling you right now.
And about that time is when they started taking stuff down off the website and things like that. So the next report that I was able to find was in December 22nd. WOTC announces they will produce a new open gaming license. However, they note that the previous OGL 1.0A will still exist and can still be used. However, for those who use the new OGL 1.1, which is to be released in early 2023, there will be some limitations added with regards to the type of products that can which can be used, which it can use, and reportedly reporting to WOTC your annual OGL related revenue. They also added that royalties for third-party publishers who make more than $750K a year. That's huge. So now, if I want to continue to use an OGL license, I got to pay a royalty. That's unprecedented in, for the past, 16 years?
Yeah.
So,
and to be fair, that part is probably not going to affect... I can maybe think of 4 or 5.
There's less than 10 companies.
Yeah, exactly.
But
still,
it's definitely targeting the direct competition of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah,
right? Or Wizards of the Coast. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So then, so that kind of rattled everybody's cage a little bit. And then if you go back to, Ian World or some of these other places with news articles, you'll see that people were starting to get, the prickly hairs on the back of their neck standing up saying, something's going on here that...
and this is about the time I started seeing stuff and I'm like, okay, something indeed is going on. What is happening? Because I've started to see more and more chatter about it about this time.
Right. Now, sometime towards the end of the year, I've been told it was around the 29th or 30th of December. There was a bunch of publishers that were asked to attend a meeting, and according to the source that I have, said the key third-party creators. Now, I haven't talked to my friends at Paizo yet to see if they were involved in this meeting, but I know a couple other people that I know were under a strict NDA agreement that was set up through the WOTC licensing department in order to share the company's plans for releasing D&D going forward. That's when a lot of these companies first received a copy of this OGL 1.1. And then right after the Christmas break, a lot of companies, they take the week or two around Christmas off.
Right.
So people came back, and like the first week in January, suddenly there's rumors about changes to the open gaming license, and that WOTC is going to deauthorize, and you're going to hear that word a lot too, deauthorize the existing open gaming license in favor of a new one. Well, then everybody's like, whoa, what's going on? What new one are you talking about here? When is this going to happen? It's at that time that over on I actually follow Gizmodo, Drac. I don't know if you do.
I do too. Yep.
Okay, so Gizmodo is a website. It's a part of the IO9 company internet presence. And Linda Kodega received a copy of this super secret NDA protected Wizards licensing agreement. And she basically went through it and said, it's 10 times as long as the old OGL. Now, I don't know. Did you go through and read it, Drac?
Some of it. I'll be honest. I got bored after a while.
You get bored really quick.
Yeah.
But what they do is what they were doing. Why it's so long? I mean, really, the honest reason why it's so long is they'll say something and then they'll do a whole paragraph explaining what it means in game terms. It was.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It was really ridiculous.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah. So it's really long. It prohibits what they call bigoted content and NFTs. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. It also prohibits apps, video games. Wait a minute. I got to get this right here because it's the last. It said it prohibits apps, or it prohibits things including apps, video games, but not limited to virtual tabletops or VTD campaigns, computer games, novels, apps, graphic novels, music, songs, dance, and pantomimes. Boy, I love a good D&D pantomime.
Me too. I'm gonna miss those. Like, those pantomimers at Gen Con that keep getting arrested. Exactly. It's like, come on, Gen Con's not going to be the same. Like, who wrote this?
I don't know.
Like,
I had to literally. I said, is that the word pantomime? I said, did they misspell something? That I,
yeah, no.
yeah.
Me
Okay,
too. I spent about 10 minutes trying to Google. It's like, okay, what could this word actually be other than that word? But nope, that's got to be it. Okay.
crazy,
Sure.
crazy stuff.
Yeah.
All right, okay. The big one deauthorizes the previous OGL, so the old OGL is gone. It can't be used, which means that after a specific date, which I'll get to in a minute, you can't produce any game content further without using the new OGL. So think about it. So I'm a company. I just put out a big campaign book last September. Okay. And now I'm trying to release supplements for that game product, but I can't because after January 13th, which is when they say it's supposed to go active, I have to say I have to sign up with WOTC to use the new OGL or I'm going to get my butt sued. That's crazy. So some of the declarations in the new OGL was that there will be a new system reference document. And then the big thing was the royalties. So then you came around with the royalties. So any company that made more than $750K a year will have to pay royalties to WOTC. Now here's the big rub on that. It isn't profits, it's revenue. So if let's say my margin on a product is 25% or even 20%, let's say I put extra money into this product, I'm going to actually lose money producing this product under WOTC's.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Under this structure. And there's other tiers too, 50K to 75K and under 50K. Now, oh, by the way, if you signed up with WOTC back in December when they gave you that new cool OGL, well, that percentage dropped from 25 to 15%. Still, 15%. I mean, think of all the companies that have employees that they're paying freelancers.
Still going to be cutting into your bottom line big time, even at 15%.
And then they kind of hit you where the sun don't shine. And he says, hey, guess what? This applies to Kickstarter too. So they brokered a deal with Kickstarter that says, hey, we're doing this. Anybody that's publishing OGL content is going to have to give us 25%. Well, the Kickstarter guys chirped in and said, hey, that's a lot of money. Can we get it dropped down? And they said, okay, 20. And WOTC or Kickstarter said, fine, whatever. You know, if that's what you're going to do. And the Kickstarter guys kind of jumped in and said, hey, look, we fought you for a lower percentage, even though we're not happy about it. And then the last thing, which is completely irrelevant to this whole thing here, you got to put a new logo on your products. Oh boy.
Of course. Yay. Yeah. New logos. Yay.
Yeah. So almost immediately, I mean, and this was on the 9th of was it the 9th or the 5th of January? Am I getting my thing wrong here? It's somewhere between the 9th and 5th of January. And then that's when the internet exploded. So Ryan Dancy came on and he says, it's my public opinion that Hasbro does not have the power to deauthorize a version of the OGL. If that had been a power that we wanted to reserve for Hasbro, we would have enumerated it in the license. I'm on record in numerous places in emails and blogs and interviews saying that this license can never be revoked. Now remember, Hasbro came up with this license, but company leaders change, directives change, all this other stuff. And that's what led to this. Then on the 9th of January is when things started to get real. That's when people started doing open letters to WOTC. There was probably 3 or 4 letter campaigns. And then the social media hashtag OpenD&D. So # open D, the letter ND, was everywhere. There was over 4,000 companies and people that signed up for it. Many of them were small publishers. And the Open D&D statement basically was, if this new license gains wide adoption, the tabletop industry will shrink to a fraction of its current size, shuttering the small businesses that populate your local cons and putting a stop to their creations. It's just crazy. Innovations in the gaming industry will evaporate. Your favorite games will be trapped in the past instead of being allowed to migrate to your phone, virtual reality, and beyond. let's see. Then there were several other open letters that were started. One by a gentleman named John Brazer Enterprises. I'm not quite sure what products he produces, but the name does sound familiar. As small publishers and individual creators who create considerable amount of content under the OGL 1.0A, we the undersigned call upon you to reverse course in regards to the leaked alleged text of the OGL 1.1. As the leaders in the tabletop industry, your direction guides us all. We believe that this new version of the OGL will hurt both us and by extension you, and we ask that you hear our concerns. And then the side, you could hear the gaming industry, you could hear a pin drop, because you got about a week's time since this all started, and not a single comment from WOTC or a social media post from anybody at WOTC or anything. So then, Drac, have you ever looked at the Battle Zoo stuff?
I have not, actually.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I haven't looked at it. So Battle Zoo, they create a product where you can play monsters and campaigns and stuff like that. I believe that's what it's all about. It's also the guys that do the Roll for Combat podcasting.
Oh, okay.
Which is a podcast. They're one of the official Paizo podcast groups.
Okay.
They actually leaked the physical document. Okay. They said, the hell with your non-disclosure. Here, they put it out there as a PDF for everybody to see. They gave it to Linda at Gizmodo, and they ran a live YouTube recording. If you want to see it, go to their YouTube channel, and for like 8 hours that day. And I remember, because I had my phone in my back pocket at work, and I had one of my earbuds in. I was listening to the whole thing. And they had a lot to say, going over it line by line, and what are we going to do? And that was probably late afternoon on the 9th, if I remember correctly. Then January 10th is when the publishers kind of stepped forward, and they must have all gotten the meetings and were up late at night, and then they announced all these statements and initiatives against Wizards of the Coast. The first one to come through was Cobalt Press. My former TSR bandmate, Wolfgang Bauer. And if you guys haven't seen some of the Cobalt Press books, check them out. They're awesome.
They're really good. Yeah, they are. Cobalt Press does amazing work.
Yeah. And one of Wolf's head editors is Thomas Reed, another, you'll recognize his name from TSR products, and a lot of the Forgotten Realms books that he's written over the years. Cobalt Press announced that they're raising the flag to come up with a new game that's compatible with everything else that they put out. And they were calling it Project Black Flag. And they were just about to release a Kickstarter, or they did release a Kickstarter called Deep Magic Volume 2, which is going to be fully compatible with 5e rules. So there you go. They were the first company to step forward and say, hey, look, we're not going to sign this OGL. We're going to come up with an OGL free version of a role-playing game, and that's where we're going to go going forward. Let's see. Frog God Games and Necromancer Games posted a lengthy statement. They basically call Wizards of the Coast evil.
Yeah,
and they reference the Darth Vader and Lando Calrissian from Empire Strikes Back. I'm altering the steel. Pray I don't alter it any further.
When I first read their statement, I was like, "Damn!"
Oh, after that came out, you should have seen the memes were uncontrollable.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he basically says here, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but it says, we are offended that unless we give them the right to let them revoke our ability to publish at any time within 30 days notice, we cannot make any more books. We are offended, and he uses that word several times.
Yeah.
That even though we have spent thousands of dollars in making virtual tabletop versions of our games, we can't do it anymore. Yeah. So that one was kind of huge. Now, back in October of 2022, Ray Whittinger, who I don't know personally, but he was the executive producer of D&D. Well, he left the company, and it hasn't been said or stated by him, but a lot of people think he left because of this, because he found out what was going on. Ray said, I believe it's not in the long-term interest of either D&D community or the D&D business to show for WOTC to move forward with something like the league plan. Yeah. So then, rumor got out. So that went on. So you had people just in an uproar for 2 days. And you know what? I have it in here wrong in the timeline. Between the 10th and the 12th, one of the things that the D&D community was saying to do in protest is cancel your D&D Beyond account. And the guys from Roll for Combat, they were saying that every 10 minutes on the stream, because people are like, what can I do? What can I do? And they're like, cancel your D&D Beyond account.
Yeah,
that's the only...
Jenny D also was a good spearhead of that too. She's very popular in the D&D community, and that's the first time I heard that, when she had said that, and then other people jumped on and joined her. So, right,
and that, because if you listen to the Roll for Combat cast, the main guy that does it, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He used to work for Blizzard, and he says, hey, look, the guys that sit in the top chairs at these companies, and unfortunately, WOTC is like that now. The head of the president of the company and all that stuff, they're not D&D players, they're business people. Some of them came from Microsoft.
They had about two of them. Two of the heads at WOTC both came from Microsoft in the Xbox division. So yeah.
Right. And they said the only way you're going to make your voice heard is with dollar signs. Mm-hmm. So this big thing about canceling your D&D Beyond account is pretty much the only thing that's going to tell them, hey, we're not cool with this.
Which there was so many people that canceled their accounts. The D&D Beyond servers crashed.
Yes. And I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So on January 12th, on the D&D Beyond, I don't know if it's a Twitch stream. I think it's a Twitch stream, isn't it?
Yeah.
They were going to do an announcement of what was going on with the Open Gaming License. And it was supposed to happen at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, there was this huge push right before then. People were saying, cancel your accounts, sign all these petitions, do all this stuff, tell WOTC what you think, blah, blah, blah. And then about halfway through the day, there was an anonymous WOTC insider that posted a message. Now, I heard that Linda from Gizmodo verified this source. And this is what the person had to say. I'm an employee at WOTC, currently working on D&D Beyond with the D&D Beyond business leaders on the health of the product line. If you want, I can provide proof of this. Okay. I'm sending this message because I fear for the health of the community I love, and I know what the leaders of WOTC are looking for. They are briefly delaying rollout of the OGL changes due to backlash. Their decision making is based entirely on their bottom line. Specifically, they're looking at D&D Beyond subscriptions and cancellations as it is the quickest financial data that was available. They are hoping that over time the community will forget this ever happened and push through. And then the person also says, I have decided to reach out because at my time at WOTC, I've never once heard management refer to customers in a positive manner. Their communication gives me the impression they see customers as obstacles between them and their money. And the D&D Beyond team was first told to prepare to support the new OGL changes and online portal when they got back from the holidays. And leadership doesn't take any responsibility for the pain and stress they cause others. Leadership's first communication to the rank and file in the OGL changes was 30 minutes on the day before, so 1/11, so literally the day before. This is the first time they even tried to communicate their intentions regarding the OGL to employees, and even in this meeting, they blame the community for overreacting. And he says, I will repeat, the main thing the leadership is looking at is D&D Beyond subscription cancellations. First of all, holy crap.
Yeah.
Second of all, this is when the D&D Beyond cancellations really took off.
Yeah.
And then WOTC canceled their stream at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. About an hour after that happened.
Yeah.
Now, during the day, I sent a quick note to my friend Jim at Paizo, Jim Butler, the president of Paizo. And I said, Jimmy, I feel really sorry for you. I hope everything's going well. And he goes, we're good. And he says, watch for an announcement after the WOTC announcement. And I said, okay. And then the WOTC announcement never came. So then about an hour and a half later, Paizo announces that they're coming up with the new open RPG creative, or ORC for short.
Which I love the name.
I know, it's great.
It's an amazing name.
And they're going to come up with their own open gaming license that is irrevocable. Okay. Now, and Jim has a big, long statement, and he says companies like Cobalt Press, Chaosium, Green Ronin, Legendary Games, Rogue Genius, and a growing list of publishers are all going to use this license for their products going forward. Now, don't confuse licenses with rules. Okay. It's also important to note that Pathfinder 2nd Edition doesn't contain any OGL material. They were very specific when they designed their new version of Pathfinder. There is an OGL in the book, but it was put there as a courtesy, not because they were using OGL content. And that's huge. That means that Pathfinder 2nd Edition is completely unaffected by anything that WOTC does. And a lot of people jump ship from 5th edition to Pathfinder in the last couple of weeks. I'm on a Pathfinder Facebook group, and the membership in that group has tripled since this whole thing started. And that's huge. And it's important to note that the guy that's drawing up this document is the same guy, the same legal person. Does Jim name him here? Hold on a second. Let me look. No, he doesn't. He names him in another document. His name is Brian something, I think. He's the same guy who did the legal text for the OGL 1.0A. Or 1.0A. Yep. So, huge. Then, early the next day, all the news organizations started picking up. So, Guardian, Vice, Electronic Frontier Foundation, Comic Book Resources, Forbes, Ars Technica, Financial Times, picked it up that says, hey, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro is completely alienating their customers by doing all this stuff.
Yeah, this went way mainstream. Like
it got
like
huge,
way
really
beyond just the standard, game geek media. I mean, it went. Yep. And I can point out one, that Electronic Frontier Foundation, that was an amazing written article. So
that wasn't one I looked at.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, there is so many of them, but that one, a couple people sent me that one, and that one I did read, and it was really good.
Yeah. So then all day on that Friday the 13th, ironically, this just continued, where the community was just so against what they were doing. And then at 5 minutes to 4 p.m. Eastern time, I believe, Hasbro finally put out a statement.
Oh God, this statement!
I know this statement is. So I may pause in this statement just to make a comment. But
sure.
When we initially conceived of revising the OGL, which by the way you can't according to your own terms, it was with three major goals in mind. First, we wanted the ability to prevent the use of D&D content from being included in harmful and discriminatory products. Okay. But I have a big problem with that, and I'll mention it later. Second, we want to address those attempting to use D&D and Web3 blockchain games and NFTs by making it clear that OGL content is limited to tabletop role-playing content like campaigns, modules, and supplements. I don't even know what that means.
Was there anybody really going to make a D&D NFT? I have never heard of anybody even announcing they were going to do a D&D NFT.
So I have a theory about this, but we'll save it for later. But this is like pantomime. I mean, like, where are they coming up with this stuff, right?
I'm pretty sure people that buy NFTs were not clamoring for a D&D NFT, but okay.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Okay.
And third, we want to ensure that the OGL is for content creators, the home brewer, the aspiring designer, our players, and the community, not major corporations for use with their own commercial and promotional purposes. Okay,
Other
so right
than
there
yourself.
they're saying, right there they're saying we want to be the king of the hill. Nobody like Paizo or Cobalt or anything
Right.
can be even close to us. We produce D&D. The rest of you can go pound sand. Okay, so driving these goals were two simple principles: our job to be good stewards of the game,
Okay.
and two, the OGLs exist for the benefit of the fans. Okay. You know what? And I'll say this right now. Your basic D&D player who gets around a table, once a week with their friends and drinks beer and eats pizza, and you know what? Most of those people aren't going to care about this.
Right.
But for those of us in the gaming industry or who have been in the gaming industry or friends in the gaming industry who understand that, hey, maybe WOTC doesn't put out a product that I 100% like. Maybe I like Pathfinder better. Maybe I like something that these other companies are doing, but now you're messing with my fun over there. Will there be a large group of people that really don't care about what's going on with the LDL? Yeah, probably. But I think enough of those people understand what the gaming community is like to step in and say, no, this isn't correct. So to continue, that was why our early drafts. Okay, right there, I'm going to stop. This was not a draft.
No.
This was go back to the meeting in December with the people under the non-disclosure agreement. This was what they're telling them. This is what it's going to be. This is the final. There's no draft, blah, blah, blah. This is it.
Right. And who writes a 9,000 word draft?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it was like, okay, this is the cut with all the commentary in it. Now the next one will be the whatever. But it wasn't a draft. It wasn't a draft. They wanted to do this.
They had this ready to go, and they wouldn't have called the meetings with all of the third party people if they didn't have this ready to go and was going to roll this out. Don't let this fool you one bit.
So then they say that draft provided content creators and publishers so their feedback could be considered before anything was finalized. Oh God. In addition to language allowing us to add discriminatory and hateful conduct, there that is again, and clarifying what types of products the OGLs covers, our draft includes royalty language designed to apply to large corporations attempting to use OGL content. It was never our intent to impact the vast majority of the community. Well, you did. However, it is clear that the action from a reaction that we rolled a 1. Well, no kidding.
Yeah, no joke.
It has become clear that, and that was the title for some of the articles too, right?
Yeah.
It's like WOTC rolls a natural 1. It's become clear that it has no longer been possible to fully achieve these 3 goals while staying true to our principles. So here's what we're doing. The next OGL will contain a provision to allow us to protect and cultivate inclusive environments we are trying to build, and specifically that it covers only content for tabletop RPGs. That means other expressions such as educational and charitable campaigns, live streams, cosplay. Were they going to really go after cosplayers?
I wondered that too when I first read the statement. I'm like, why did you bring up cosplay and all this?
I see these guys in riot gear tackling somebody dressed as Elminster at Gen Con, right?
Right.
VTTs, like uses, etc., will remain unaffected by the OGL update. Well, first of all, I'm going to call bull crap on that line right there.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that later.
Oh, there's so much bull crap in this whole statement.
Content already released under 1.0a will also remain unaffected. Well, so right there, that is actually good. So all these companies that have all this content written under the OGL, all this back stuff that they're trying to sell, blah, 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 they don't have to pay royalties on it. So, you know what? I like that line. I mean, that's better. What it will not contain is any royalty structure. So they gave up on that pipe dream right there. It also will not include a license back provision that some people were afraid of means we want to steal their work. And we really didn't touch on that. One of the other things in their original draft was that anything you publish under the OGL 1.1 is Wizards of the Coast can use it and reproduce it without paying you a dime. That was incredibly bold. That's like if I come up with a really cool campaign world and I publish it out on RPG Now or Drive Through RPG, and WOTC says, "Hey, we like that. It was published under OGL. I'm going to take that and I'm going to make books out of it and sell it, and you don't get a dime." I don't know who in their right mind would have thought that was a good idea.
Right.
Okay, so let me jump ahead. Any language we put down will be crystal clear and unequivocal on that point. The license back language was intended to protect us and our partners from creators who incorrectly allege that we steal their works simply because of coincidental similarities. I don't know who those people are. As we continue to invest in the game that we love and move forward with partnerships in the film, television, and digital games, remember that that risk is simply too great to ignore. So basically, they're saying that let's say 5 years ago somebody wrote a DM's Guild thing and under the OGL, and it had something that suddenly appeared in a television show. Well, then they could turn around and sue them for that. So they're trying to cover their asses with people. Because unfortunately, that's been a thing in the RPG industry, right? Some people will steal ideas and not give other people credit, and it's unfortunate. But I kind of get what they're saying here, but the way they went about it was wrong. The new OGL will contain provisions to address that risk. Okay, a couple of last thoughts. First, we won't be able to release the new OGL today. Well, no kidding, because we need to make sure we get it right, but it's coming. Well, we'll talk about that later. Second, you're going to hear people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plan. Those people are only half right. They won it and we also did. No, you didn't.
Okay, can we talk about that statement? Like, as a corporation, why the hell would you put that in a statement?
I don't know.
We won too. Nah.
Yeah, a lot of the news organizations are calling BS on that line.
Oh yeah, come on, Hasbro, really?
Yeah, and I'm not even going to read the last paragraph. It's basically we're the stewards of the game. We're trying to do what's best for everybody. Blah 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 blah.
The only thing I'll bring up in the last paragraph is when they say our plan was always to solicit the input of our community before any update to the OGL.
Oh yeah.
Really?
No, it wasn't.
So when did you plan to do this?
the hour before it was supposed to go.
Because remember, this wasn't a draft. So when were you going to input some community in this? Yeah. Give me a break.
Yeah. So just to kind of recap what they were trying to do. They were trying to shut down charitable campaigns, live streams, VTTs, all that stuff. They're saying we can use your content for any reason. Royalties. So their statement basically says, okay, non-tabletop role-playing mediums such as educational, charitable, live streams, cosplay are unaffected by the new license. Okay, so they're taking that out. So it's like, well, we don't want to stop your live streams and your cosplay anymore. We took out the part that says we can't use your content for any reason. We took out the royalties. Previous OGL content's already been published, can be sold, and but new stuff still must use the new OGL. Doesn't say that the old one isn't not deauthorized anymore. So that's they don't have to report revenue, and there's still no mention of a share-alike aspect, which defines an open license. And if you know a little bit about copyright law and things like that, there's something called share-alike, Creative Commons, Creative Commons open licenses, and that's part of what Paizo is going to be doing stuff. So it says all this stuff, and it rolls back, it steps back in a bit, but the OGL 1.0a is still being deauthorized.
That's the important point of all this. Remember that. Yeah. That is still going away, which, as you remember, we talked about earlier, they themselves said they can't do that.
Right. And even today, so we're still only on the 13th, and today's the 22nd as we record this. That still is the truth. Now, Gizmodo also reported that after the fan-led campaign to cancel D&D subscriptions, a message sent to WOTC and a message was sent to WOTC and higher up saying, "Hey, look, we got a few cancellations here.
What's going on, boys?
What's happening?" And the hashtag D&D be gone
Which
campaign
was amazing.
Right. So apparently, according to some D&D Beyond people, which, by the way, right before Christmas, they let a whole bunch of D&D Beyond people go. And more on that in a minute. So when you cancel your D&D Beyond account, it generates a help desk ticket in the system. So after they fixed the website crashing all the time and blah, 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 sources inside Wizards of the Coast confirmed that earlier this week, there were 5 digits worth of complaining tickets in the system that said, "Hey, we're canceling our account." Now, some people paid by the year. So, whenever your yearly anniversary was, because I think they gave you a bonus for a year. But let's assume your average player spends, I don't know, $100 a year on D&D Beyond. So at the very minimum, that was $999,999.
Yeah.
So $1 million at the minimum.
That's a good chunk of change.
What the actual number is being estimated at is around 40,000.
I have read 40 to 50,000. Yeah, is what I've read on different places.
So an immediate hit of $4 million to WOTC's bottom line. Now, they say they make billions on D&D, so, but hey, think of it this way. They are trying to get money from D&D Beyond. Let's back up a minute. There was an article that I couldn't find, Drac, after I read it, from a lawyer. He was a copyright lawyer, and he played D&D. And he said two things. One, he says, can people take WOTC to court for this? And the answer is yes, but they're going to drag it out forever because they have the money to do it. It's the same tactic that TSR did. They dragged out all their lawsuits over years and years, and eventually companies gave up because it was
right. It gets too expensive, and it's not worth the time at that point.
Now, Paizo has said that they'll fight to the death in court. So, and Paizo's got a little bit of a checkbook behind him. So we'll have to see if that comes to that. And what was the second thing? I always forget the second thing because the first one was huge. He said, I'm forgetting the exact terminology. I'll think of it in a minute. But he said, well, can they be sued for this? Well, yeah. Are they going to lose? Probably, but it could take 4 or 5 years. Well, by 4 or 5 years, all these other companies are going to be out of business.
Right.
That's huge. So, and then after that came to light, he says, according to multiple sources, these immediate financial consequences were the main reason that forced them to change their mind. The decision to further delay the rollout of the new open gaming license and adjust the messaging around the rollout occurred because of a provable impact to their bottom line. So kudos to the D&D community for letting their voice be heard as far as this goes. So then you got the weekend, 14th, 15th. On the 16th, the news channels were a little bit lighter. But then on the 17th, the guys at Roll for Combat, and like I said, the gentleman there, he used to work for Blizzard, and he's a programmer. He's a gaming programmer, and he also said that he has some friends that were were hired by WOTC. So at some point in time, like I mentioned before, D&D Beyond staffers were I don't want to say let go, but the staff was reduced. So was it last year, Drac, that D&D bought or Hasbro bought D&D Beyond?
Yeah, it was towards the very end of last year.
Okay, so Hasbro buys D&D Beyond for $140 million. Okay, and then rumors has it, that they're putting over $300 million into the development of a new virtual tabletop environment. Okay, so now the light above your head kind of winks on and off.
Should be on now, exactly.
Hey, wait a minute. Could this be the whole reason they're doing this? He also says that he thought that there's a rumor, and this rumor has since been debunked by WOTC, but I don't believe him, that the subscription tier for $30 a month, a player will be able to come to to D&D Beyond and play in a dungeon with an artificial intelligent DM. Sounds kind of like DDO, doesn't it?
Sort of, yeah, a little bit.
And this is why I'm worried.
Yeah.
Now, again, WOTC has debunked this. Some gentleman named Kyle something, who's the head of D&D now, came on him with a statement saying, nope, we're not doing AIs. But why would you hire $300 million worth of programmers to develop an environment? The guys that developed Fantasy Grounds were three guys from Finland.
Right. I'm like...
And they did it as a side job. Now, since then, Doug Davidson, who's part owner now, head of Fantasy Grounds, has taken over. But I don't think he's put $300 million into the development of Fantasy Grounds.
Right.
So they're trying to create something that's completely freaky of video game caliber. Now, one of the things that the gentleman at Roll for Combat said, that he says, well, supposedly DMs account for 80% of WOTC's sales, which... Think about it. The only thing a player really needs to buy is a player's
handbook, right?
Or if you get the Tasha's book, maybe.
Yeah, I got to say, you could get the supplement books.
Yeah, so is it a good idea to replace them with AI robots? Well, so does that mean that paper gaming is going away? Maybe is what
they would like it to. It sounds like, yeah.
Sure. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Drake. What is one of the reasons Turbine gave up on DDO was they wanted to do mobile games?
Yes.
Okay. Keep that in mind.
Yes.
That smells a little bit like
where the whole split happened. Yes.
Yeah. So $300 million. That's major MMO money, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, that's a good chunk of money for an MMO, right. Indeed.
So then the next day, after the guy from Roll for Combat makes this declaration, WOTC jumps on board and says, hey, $30 subscription fee is false. No one at Wizards is working on AI DMs. We love our human DMs. Sure.
Yeah. Let me hang on just 1 second. Let me do clarify something too about what we just said about Turbine. It was actually Warner Brothers who owned Turbine. You are correct. Yep, is the one that wanted to get more into the mobile game space. It wasn't Turbine themselves. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Nope, that is a great point. Thank you for clarifying that. Yep. And okay, so he said, we have designers whose core job is to compile, analyze, and then act upon your feedback. Your feedback has made the game better over the future, over the years, blah, blah, blah. One thing I want to point out, and I just remembered what the lawyer guy said. He said, one of the things that was said in the meetings a while back was D&D is under monetized. Am I using the word correctly there? I believe so.
Yes. I remember reading that, and that is what he said. So basically,
the head-ups, the new head-ups who don't play D&D, who used to work for Microsoft, they're saying, hey, we got this IP that has the potential to just make us filthy rich. Okay? So we gotta make more money. Well, how do you do that? Oh, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can do what TSR and Paizo did. You can hire more designers, game designers, to put out more product to make more sales. But your margins aren't always the best on those, because you got to pay developers, or designers, you got to pay editors, you got to have the products printed, you got to have them shipped, you got to all that stuff. So, or you can do what WOTC's already doing. You can only put out 5 products a year. I mean, Paizo puts that out in 2 months. You can do 5 products a year, and then you can license everything else to the guilds or in this case, D&D Beyond, and that will make up all the rest of the money that you don't make by putting out more products. So you can see which path they decided to go down. Now, there might be more to it than that, but that kind of stuck with me because it's like, yeah, that makes sense because the development staff for D&D at Wizards is nothing. I mean, I saw their thing for products for 2023. There's only 5 products. 5 or 6.
6, I think.
Yeah.
That we know of, unless there's more they haven't told us.
No, they just posted something the other day.
Pretty much posted, yeah, that there is 6 in the pipeline. Yeah.
So, which one of them was supposed to be Planescape, so we'll see. Nothing like coming up with an original idea. Exactly. And then our core group of people is the homebrewing people. Mm-hmm. So, but by design, that doesn't make sense to me because if I'm not playing a WOTC D&D product because they don't put out a whole lot, I'm playing something else. That's not necessarily a homebrew. If I'm playing 5th edition game from Cobalt Press or from Necromancer Games or from
that's technically not a homebrew.
That's not homebrew. Right. That's another company putting out a product that they're using your D&D Beyond app for their character. So, yeah, it's just a little bit weird. So on the 18th, January 18th, so we're getting close to a few days ago, Wizards of the Coast OGL Retort. Following last week's walk back to the open gaming license, WOTC has posted another update about what they want to do forward. The new update begins with another apology and a promise to be more transparent. To that end, WOTC proposes to release the draft of the new OGL this week, and they say draft, with a 2-week survey feedback period. So there's a link. You can find it pretty easily if you go out there, and you can give them your feedback. Now, I found out the hard way that if you start the survey and something happens and you have to come back to it later, you can't because they're grabbing your IP address and they're blocking you from.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Because I got home and I started the survey and something came up and I stepped away and I came back and my session timed out and then I couldn't finish it.
Interesting.
And I haven't seen anybody cry about this yet. Guess who's grabbing your IP address, guys? For all of those who have cyber phobias, somebody's grabbing your IP address and finding out if you submitted a survey more than one time. Mm-hmm. Also, they clarify a couple other points. Video games, accessories, VTT content, DM's Guild will not be affected by the new license, none of which is OGL related. Well, that isn't entirely true because we'll talk about the VTT content in a minute. However, the big thing is they still are deauthorizing the old OGL, period.
Right.
They are not budging on that level. They said, we're coming up with a new one that's better going forward, which is why we're turning the old one off. Well, guess what? There's nothing wrong with the old one. They just want to do a new one because it makes them, well, and we'll talk about it here. The phrase, nothing will impact the content you have published under OGL 1.0a. That will always be licensed under 1.0a. So again, they're saying anything that you've published is fine. But it doesn't make mention of any future content. If you can't publish future content under 1.0a, because it's been deauthorized, so you can't do it anymore. Period. And guys like Ryan Dancing are saying no, that is not true whatsoever.
Right.
So then, let me look at my calendar quick. On Thursday, they said, as promised, here it is, and they posted their next draft. The current iteration contains clauses which prohibit offensive content. Applies only to tabletop RPG books and PDFs. No right of ownership from WOTC and no optional creator content badge for your products. Fine. The rules, which would be the SRD portion of this equation, are going to move forward as a Creative Commons license. That means that it can't be changed. The way Creative Commons works. but it does enforce that 1.0a is still going away. Let's see. So, and this license is irrevocable. And once again, 1.0a is being deauthorized. So what I did was I went through this new version and I grabbed quotes on it. Okay. And some of this stuff is really weird to me. But as I mentioned above, content more clearly associated with D&D is what falls under the OGL. You'll see that 1.2 lets us act when offensive or hurtful content is published using the covered D&D stuff. We want D&D to be inclusive, safe, played experience for everybody. Well, they're using that as a huge crutch in this document, because if they deem your content is offensive or hurtful, they can.
That's exactly the point. Yes,
that's not an irrevocable license.
Right.
We want a safe, inclusive experience for everyone. Well, I got news for you. Back in 2003, a company published the Book of Erotic Fantasy for D&D. Nobody stepped in to stop that from happening. There was a lot of people that thought it was a joke, but hey, Hasbro, where were you 20 years ago when somebody posted this? And I'm going to tell you what, I still follow D&D on Instagram, and every once in a while, they post a picture of the Book of Vile Darkness, which is a fun read, but it does have a little bit of some controversial stuff.
I was going to bring up, are we totally getting rid of the Book of Vile Darkness? This was as long ago as like maybe a month.
That's kind of weird.
And
so
then again, they're the ones that are saying, okay, this is offensive, so we're taking this away from you. Like, I don't know. That's a slippery slope to climb on, my friend.
Yep. And there's a lot of, and I got a statement on that from some people in a little bit here.
Slippery slope.
Yeah. I mean, and basically they're saying, and then they double down on it and say, we're deauthorizing 1.08. We know this is a big concern. The Creative Commons license and the open terms of 1.2 are intended to help with that. Well, that's only with the SRD content. One key reason that we want to deauthorize, we want to use the protective options of 1.2 if someone can choose to publish harmful, discriminatory, or illegal content under 1.0a. So basically they're doubling down and using this as an additional excuse to deauthorize the old OGL. I mean, I am completely and utterly, and I know I can speak for you too, Drac, that against anything like that in a printed product whatsoever. But to use it as a crutch,
right,
to get a publisher, in violation of the agreement. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that they're putting themselves up as the moral king, making decisions of what's good and bad. Now, I read in a thread once, a guy said, I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before, he said, well, what if I own a company and I hire a freelancer and that freelancer goes out and murders somebody? Is WOTC going to step in and say all of your products are revoked and you can't use our license anymore? That's a really slippery slope. I mean, the wording, everybody's saying that the wording is horrible.
It's
one of the things in OGL 1.2 then is the virtual tabletop policy. This is out of aside from the language crutch, this is the one I have the big problem with, because it's a policy. It's not rules for OGL and VTT creators. It's a policy. Well, a policy can be changed at any time. And they don't, that by calling it a policy means it can be changed based on other things.
Right.
So now think about it, $300 million to create their own virtual tabletop. What are they going to do with the ones that exist now? Well, they're saying, if you want to use our content, you got to sign this because we have a policy regarding how you can use your product. That's not an irrevocable license. Let's see here. And then again, in that policy, if you include harmful, discriminatory, or illegal content, or engage in that conduct publicly, and there's the thing about somebody breaking the law or something like that, we can terminate your OGL license content.
Yeah, they're like tripling down on the whole harmful content and conduct.
Yep. So, and a lot of it is hinging on this harmful or illegal content stuff. Now, I grabbed a few comments off of Ian World regarding the draft. Everybody hates that they're still deauthorizing 1.0.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
A couple people kind of said, well, if you're deauthorizing 1.0A, what about SRD for D&D 3.0 or 3.5? What is that going to? Because right now they're concentrating on 5th edition and 1D&D.
Yeah.
What about the stuff that's going on before? And a lot of publishers are stepping forward and saying, hey, I am not going to be swayed by the idea that we have to kill the OGL to save the OGL from racists and bigots and all this other stuff. I mean, you're making a change for something that may or may not ever happen. WOTC's calling it an open license, but reserve the sole right to terminate that license if they feel that you violated for any harmful content reasons. God, that's just too much.
Yeah, no. The way that's worded,
it's not worded well at all.
No, it is not.
And I mean, and here's the terminology right here, this is copied right out of the document. It says no hateful content or conduct. You will not include content in your licensed work that is harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, or harassing, or engage that content that is harmful, discriminatory, illegal, obscene, or harassing. We have the sole right to decide what content or conduct or content is harmful, and you and your covenant that you will not. Oh, and basically they're saying you promise not to take legal action against us because we're doing this. That's basically what it's not worded very well. So hey, wait a minute. Now you say you can cancel my product and I can't sue you if I sign this OGL? And then they follow it up with, class action waiver, a thing on class action waiver lawsuits.
Yeah, this was interesting to me that they put this in here.
Yep. This license and all matters relating to its interpretation and enforcement will be governed by the laws of the state of Washington, and any disputes arising out of or relating to this license will be resolved solely and exclusively through individual litigation in the state or federal court located in the county in which Wizards or any of its successors has headquarters, and the parties expressed consent to this jurisdiction of the courts. Each party hereto revocably waives the right to participate in any class, collective, or other joint actions as a result of this dispute. So they're basically saying that you can't have a class action lawsuit against them if you accept this license.
Right. I would have to sue them myself if I want to do anything to them.
Yeah. And then they would bury you in court and you would never see the light of day, and it doesn't.
No. And how is one one going to go up against a Hasbro lawyer anyway? Or teams of Hasbro lawyers, I should say.
Right.
Oh my God.
It's really crazy. So really, the license says it's irrevocable, and it's not. WOTC can terminate it at any time. Okay. We may immediately terminate your license if you infringe on our intellectual property. Okay. even though we signed the license, and they're still resolving. So then there was one guy that says, "Is there anything good about this? Oh, this new OGL? Is there good stuff?" Well, they've removed a majority of the stuff that people were complaining, but the stuff that's still there is still bad enough that nobody wants to deal with it. It's crazy. Right now it covers printed media and electronic files such as EPUBs and PDFs. What about web page content? Okay, what if somebody does all their stuff for free on the web for anybody to consume? Is that subject to it? Is that considered a static electronic file? And they make all and all these other things about NFTs and stuff like that. It's just the clarifying information is just not there. It's not. If they want to be restrictive, they have to be more restrictive. But then people are saying, well, they'll just fight it in court and drown you in lawyers, and then you'll just give in.
Again, is anybody clamoring for a D&D NFT? I don't think so. I really don't. I don't understand why they're hung up on this NFT thing.
Maybe you should call this episode the NFT, the pantomiming NFT.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't get it. Okay, cool. I mean, fine, but
all right. So there's really a couple more things I want to say, because that kind of takes us up to current time.
Yeah.
There is one other thing, and I honestly didn't catch this on my first read, but the guys that do Foundry, the virtual tabletop Foundry, which is getting to be really popular. I mean, they have Pathfinder stuff in it now. They have a lot of different other companies doing stuff for it, and they actually rely heavily on their community to develop content for them. They have you buy a $50 license. It's a one-time fee, and then after that, everybody have fun. They kind of dissected this regarding the virtual tabletop policy and something called unwitting acceptance. And I missed this the first time around. And when I was reading through the article that Foundry posted, they say this license covers any content in the SRD 5.1 or subsequent versions of the SRD we release under this license that is not licensed to you under Creative Commons. You may use that content in your works on the terms of this license. Okay, on the surface that sounds okay, but somebody jumped in and said, whoa, wait a minute. If I publish something in the future and I use the SRD and I use anything SRD related, it the new license automatically applies no matter what I say about it. So basically, and that's anything after May of 2016. So the SRD 5.1 was created in May of 2016. So what they're saying is, you're automatically accepting this license if you publish anything under this SRD version. So basically, they're saying if you don't put an OGL statement in your product, it applies to you anyway, regardless.
You can say you're still accepting it, even though you're not accepting it. Okay,
right. So that snuck in there on a few people, because I didn't see that with the original comments on it, and then the VTT policy. And I got a link here, Drac. I don't know if you want to put it in the show notes for people to link up to the Foundry website for this.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the OGL draft 1.2 references a separate document called the Virtual Tabletop Policy. Well, why would they do that? Oh, because they're coming out with their own virtual tabletop, which covers the terms under which virtual tabletops and VTT content may be offered under the OGL. And the guys are saying this is a very flawed policy. It is and the thing they're saying, it's a policy rather than a legal term that is typically covered under the old OGL. And there it basically says, I gotta actually zoom in on this a little bit because I copy and pasted the actual thing here. they say in their policy, what is permitted under this policy? Using VTTs to replicate the experience of sitting around the table playing D&D with your friends. Okay. So displaying static SRD content is just fine because it's like looking at a source book. You can put the text of Magic Missile up on your VTT and use it to calculate your damage to your target. Automating Magic Missile damage to replace manual rolling is calculating is fine. The VTT can apply Magic Missile damage automatically to your target's hit points, and you do not have to manually calculate and track damage, which is what we've been doing for years. Here's the rub. What isn't permitted are features that don't replicate your dining room tabletop storytelling. Huh? If you replace your imagination with an animation of a magic missile streaking across the board to strike your target, or your VTT integrates content into an NFT, there's that NFT again.
Yeah.
That is not the tabletop experience. That is more like a video game. Okay. So now think back, $300 million. Chances are they're creating a hybrid between a virtual tabletop and a video game that's going to have things like magic flying across the screen, blood spraying when you hit somebody.
Really sounds like it.
It sure does. And Drac, let's go back to your last show with Pine Leaf, where you talked about all the video games that were being canceled.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's what happens in a video game. Mm-hmm. So now they're cornering the market on what's a tabletop experience versus what's a video game experience. Saying, hey, if you want to have a video game that's D&D, well, you might have to conform with this license, or this license applies to that and you can't do it. So I mean, that's crazy.
I don't.
Why would they put that in there unless they were trying to enforce something that they thought was going to be a problem later? So what if this whole thing was just some mad evil plan to prevent people from competing with their new virtual
tabletop, right?
Which is kind of where I'm thinking is happening here.
More and more you read into it, the more and more you really think that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I know they called BS on the guy that said they're developing AIs and stuff like that.
Right.
But they're not developing AIs, but they're giving these dungeon masters all these tools to make it look like and I'll bet it ain't going to be a 2-dimensional game.
Yeah, no.
It'll be a 3-dimensional game, something like like Gloomhaven or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be like a video game, for lack of a better way to explain it. But if you remember back in the 4.0 days, when they had, what was that thing called that they had that was the online D&D portal that they were really investing in for? There was a
Neverwinter Nights thing where you could develop your own dungeons and stuff. Yeah.
And then they had like it was like I can't remember what it was called, but they announced they were going to come out with a virtual tabletop that sounded exactly like this. That was going to be animated. It was going to have animated character pawns. It was going to have spell effects. This was announced back then, and then that's when people left. I mean, the whole 4.0 thing did take off, and then they quickly dumped that whole thing. So it's not out of the realm that, yes, they will do something like this for a tabletop.
Yeah. I mean, the virtual tabletop should only replicate your sitting around a physical table. I mean, what? I mean, why? How do they think that they're going to enforce? I mean, what's their interpretation of? Is the virtual tabletop going to have pizza all over the floor and empty soda bottles and beer bottles and bowls of chips and stuff like that?
Right.
This is really they're trying to protect D&D from because they're going to be doing this. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's become clear that this is where they're headed.
Well,
and they're trying to stop everybody else from doing something similar.
why would they have spent all that money to buy D&D Beyond if they weren't going to do that?
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
For the D&D Beyond character creator?
Sure.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I did want to mention, remember when we did the show last and we were talking about Demiplane?
Yes.
The guy who created D&D Beyond and then sold it to Hasbro, he runs Demiplane now.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep. That's his. He took the money, the $140 million, and he started doing Demiplane. And even since we did that show, they've got a bunch more products in there now.
Interesting.
So
Well, I'll have to look into that more. But
yeah, but I mean, this whole thing about emphasis on NFTs is just completely absurd.
Don't get it.
And unless WOTC's going to be doing their own NFTs,
I mean,
and they're going to think. I mean, I don't get the whole NFT thing.
Anyway. I don't either. I guess I'm too old.
If you want to see something funny about NFTs, there's the 2-part COVID shows from South Park.
Yes. Oh. Highly recommend them. Highly recommend you go watch those.
Extremely fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get it, dude. I don't get it at all.
But that's what I think this is. I think this is just one gigantic master plan because they want to move D&D from more away from books and your bookshelf full of books and stuff. They want to make it all electronic, everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're never going to 100% get away from like the conventions and people playing around their gaming table, but since COVID, with people in the VTT companies have just made tremendous strides during COVID because that's how people were playing D&D together.
Right.
I mean, I'll put myself as one of them. It wasn't January 2nd was the first time in 3 years that I was sitting around the table playing D&D with people. Oh, I take that back. I did go to GaryCon, but I was masked up the previous year. But I mean, I'm talking with my regular gaming group.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's crazy. I think that this is just some master plan that they were coming up with, to protect their going forward because they don't want another Pathfinder. They don't want another hole in their legal logic that's going to produce another Pathfinder that's going to take all these millions and millions of dollars away from them. They want to move D&D to a more virtual, more electronic format. One of the guys, I'm on the GaryCon Facebook page, and one of the guys said, "Hey, don't hate me for using D&D Beyond, but I like to use it for my 5e games. Are we going to have Wi-Fi in the hotel that's going to support it?" Well, half the people came back, including Luke Gygax, and said, "Hey, Wi-Fi is spotty at best. The hotel has it, but I wouldn't rely on it. And we're pretty. I mean, the Lake Geneva Resort isn't very. It's a couple miles away from Lake Geneva, kind of in the boonies a little bit." And guy said, "Bring your books. You're going to need them." So, what does that say about, the future of D&D? Well, if everything's going to be electronic, how are you going to have an internet connection in a spotty hotel?
Right.
Or something like that. So, I mean, are they thinking of their customers? No,
not at all.
They want a renewable subscription where they can keep charging. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot this. The Roll for Combat guys, one of the things that they said that was, so I guess in D&D Beyond, you can buy feats. It's like you don't get all the content, but you could buy certain things to add to your character.
Yeah. They sell like add-on packs or whatever for content.
Yeah, he said, so I guess there's some really super powerful archer feat that they charge $10 for, but all the other feats are like $2. So it's like, so they know that they have they create a game rule in D&D, and then they charge more for it because people want that.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, this whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, let's just be honest.
And then lastly, I think it was late Friday, the Washington Post posted. They have two articles, and then the second one, first one was like the whole Wizards thing explained, and then there was another one that kind of gave more of a community view on it.
It was a pretty good read too.
They were very good reads.
Yeah.
If you want a kind of summary of what we've all talked about here, or maybe we should have led with that, Drac, then we would have lost a bunch of listeners.
Yeah, probably.
But they have a good article on it too, and we'll see what happens. We got less than 2 weeks now to see what happens after all the feedback. But if you go on to EN World, there's guys still posting about all this and still dissecting every word that's been said. And
my YouTube feed is still just full of OGL stuff. So it's
when this thing all broke
really going away.
Yeah, when this thing all broke the other day, I mean, I started reading one of the feeds on my lunch hour, and I got to page 2, and I looked, and there was like 10 pages to go, and then I was on page 3, and there was 30 pages to go. So there's all kinds of comments and things, people asking questions and things. So in conclusion of all this, I put up 3 things here. I said, what should you do if you're a D&D player? What can you do? Or what are you going to do? Well, what should you do? That's up to you. If you feel that Wizards of the Coast is a bunch of money grubbing, what's now, then switch to something else. Like I said before, people are moving to Pathfinder.
Right. There's other options. Right.
There's all kinds of other options. There's the OSR, the old school revival games, which so far has not been brought up. So first edition D&D, second edition D&D, all the old retro clones like Osric and Old School Essentials and Swords and Wizardry. They're not going to publish they'll publish the new Orc license with their new products, but not, or equivalent, but not, they're not going to do OGLs regardless. I mean, there's so much animosity now between a lot of people that they're bailing on Wizards of the Coast regardless. What can you do? Well, like we kind of went over earlier, cancel your D&D Beyond subscription, or just don't buy Wizards of the Coast products anymore. I mean, your dollar, from what everybody's saying, these guys only care about money.
That's all Hasbro cares about at this point. It's all about that dollar. So
So that's about what you can you can sign these open D&D petitions and fill out the survey. Tell them what you don't like. Yeah. Kind of go from there.
We just so happen to have a movie that's getting ready to come out. Don't go to the theater to see that movie.
And there's a 8-episode Paramount series that they want to do. And I honestly, I really hate to say that.
Which I do too, because I was so looking forward to that movie though, and I'm torn because I'm like, I want to go, but yet, do I want to give Hasbro money? I'm torn.
Yeah. So the last thing I put on here is what are you going to do? So a friend of mine, he was in the know about all this, and I said, hey, well, and he called me and he says, can you explain this all to me? And I kind of did. And he says, well, that's it. I said, what do you mean that's it? He goes, I'm taking all my D&D stuff off the shelf. And I said, well, hold on. If you want to do that for your peace of mind, that's great. But remember that if you enjoy playing D&D, I mean, some of my best friends in the world I met through playing D&D, and I'm not going to just give that up because some asshat Hasbro wants a summer home in the Catskills.
Right.
Okay. So what I would rather not support them going forward.
Right. If it's on your shelf now, they already have that money that you gave them for anything that's on your shelf.
Absolutely. I mean, they don't care about you unless you're spending money with them.
Right.
So I'm not going to give up D&D. I'm not going to give up playing with my friends or going to conventions.
Right.
I'm not going to give up our Waterdeep Dwarves game because that's 5th edition. But am I going to support them going forward? Well, unless they
Gonna have
do
to think
something
about
different.
it. Yeah, no, exactly.
I mean, well, what if they change their mind and say, okay, forget everything we just said, you know, forget it,
But
we're not doing it.
yeah,
Okay, but is that enough? I mean, considering what they were trying to do, and the community stopped them. Well, it's kind of up to you of how you're going to address it further. I mean, but like I said, there's so many people going to Pathfinder, so many people going to other companies. I got invited to the Open RPG Discord channel, which when we were doing when the link went out and Jim sent me the link personally, he says, "Go ahead and jump on here." There was 20 people every 10 seconds joining for like 3 hours. It was crazy. And I don't know if there's a way for me to tell how many people are in this channel now, but they're talking about all these different things that we can do and what kind of products people want to see developed under this new license. It's just the outpouring is just so incredible that I mean I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I can't even reach the bottom of the list of people that are logged into this channel right now as I'm looking at it. So there's a lot of people that are completely bailing on Wizards of the Coast because there are more games out there than Wizards of the Coast D&D.
right. And the bottom line, I think, is Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro has done so much damage. They have lost all the goodwill the community had about them. They have lost all the trust the community had in them. And I don't see a way that they can gain that back because they did so much damage to themselves. I don't know how they're gonna not. I mean, I'm not saying they're just going to close shop tomorrow and there's going to be no more D&D. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm like, you've done a hell of a lot of damage to your community. That somebody really up in the upper echelons in your 3-piece suits that all you care about is your vacation homes and your vacation to the tropics need to think about the people that you're trampling on to get that vacation home in Aruba or wherever.
I mean, when you got somebody that works at WOTC saying, "Hey, management doesn't care about you or anything like that." Now, could they fix this? Well, according to them, people got short memories. So, are we going to still be this mad about it this time next year? They're like, "Nah, this will all blow over like everything else."
And I've heard that more than once. That's what they're hoping. This is just all going to blow over, and people will forget about this. And like a year or two from now, people were like, "Oh yeah, I remember when we were mad at." Oh well, it's cool now. I think you've done too much to have people just forget about what you did this past month and a half, 2 months.
I mean, D&D. I mean, WotC bragged that they made $1 billion in D&D last year. I mean, you know what? It was a brag. I'm sorry. You don't go out and say, you don't see Pathfinder or Paizo saying, "Hey, we made this much money last year." You don't see them doing that. Hey, we made $1 billion last year. Whoop, 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 right in your face. The whole teabag dance and the whole 9 yards, right?
Exactly.
And so what does that say about the company? Now, one other thing that I had a note on here and I forgot to mention, at this time last year, the stock price of Hasbro was over $100.
I was going to bring up the stock price thing at some point before we ended here.
Now, okay, so there we go. It came right up on my feed here. So when I made the note in the show notes, it was at $66, down to $63 now.
Yeah.
And it was down it was at hang on. And it was at 61 on Thursday. Well, what was Thursday, Drac?
Exactly.
when they released their 1.2 draft survey.
Yeah, I don't do anything with the stock market. I'm just gonna be honest with that. But I've been kind of watching the Hasbro stock, and it's been interesting to see. And then anytime I see it dip, I'm like, well, what kind of stupid thing did they release today, or what kind of stupid comment did they make? Okay, that's why that dipped. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
it's
back in 2019, it was as high as $107 a share, and then it was down to $40 a share right after COVID hit, and then it never really recovered. But now it's at $63, but it's down $3 since since Wednesday. So that, I mean, that, what does that say? I mean, you can't ignore, now I will say one thing, and that I said before, some people aren't going to care.
right.
I have enough gaming stuff on my shelf right now that I don't have to buy a piece of gaming stuff for the rest of my life. And I could play D&D every day of the week or some role-playing game every day of the week. I'd never have to buy another piece of stuff ever again. Is that what I want to do? Hell no. I see something that cool comes out and I want it, I'm going to get it. But I don't, that passion can be very easily overwritten by something like this. And I think that that's what's going to happen for a lot of people.
Right. And, like I said too, just remember anything you own now is not going to affect them. So, I mean, I'm starting to see videos where people are burning all their 5e books and it's like, no, that's not doing anything because like I said, they have your money.
It's still D&D.
Right.
To me, it's still D&D. I'm not giving up on D&D.
Right.
Even though the system's a little bit different, Pathfinder's still D&D. I consider that still a D&D based role playing game. I consider Old School Essentials or Osric or those older retro clones.
Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Dungeon Crawl Classics is another
still D&D.
Yep. And there's a couple other ones out there kind of like Dungeon Crawl. And then look at some of the stuff that like Free League is doing. They got you know what I forgot to mention in our Kickstarter thing? They have that Dragonbane coming out.
Oh yeah, that looks really good.
Well, they just published quick start rules for that, but that's a D&D like game,
right?
That and they actually use mechanics in there that are they call them something different than 5th edition, but they have advantage and disadvantage, which is something that people got from 5th edition. But I'm not going to give up D&D.
No, exactly.
And my passion for role playing games or video games like DDO. Because of, these guys, this whole thing. But I am gonna let my pocketbook.
That's the thing.
Speak for me going forward.
Think about going forward. What you want to do if the new whatever book comes out? It's like, do I really need that whatever book?
Yeah. So
I mean, that's up to you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The last thing I will say is let's circle back to what we first talked about when we started was DDO, or better yet, let me say not necessarily DDO, but people who currently have WOTC licenses. Like Fantasy Grounds has a license right now to translate WOTC products to Fantasy Grounds. Is that going away? Well, we don't know. We don't know what the licensing agreement says. Is it infinite license? Is it a negotiable license after so many years or something like that?
Right.
I mean, that's between them and the company. And there's a lot of companies like that. There, Roll20. There's probably a few others out there that are official licensees of Wizards of the Coast. That includes Standing Stone Games. So could something happen? We don't know. I mean, we don't know what their long-term plans are or whatever. I would like to think that DDO stands on its own merit as being a Dungeons and Dragons like game, but isn't going to interfere with what they're calling the tabletop virtual experience.
Right.
But that's not for me to say.
Exactly. I don't know anything about the license.
But as much as we talk about boycotting D&D, don't necessarily boycott DDO.
Right.
It's up to everybody individually. I'm not going to be
right. Yeah, exactly.
Boycotting DDO, or Fantasy Grounds, which we use. Will I buy any Fantasy Grounds products going forward? Because WotC gets a cut of those.
Yeah.
No, we'll see.
Have to think about it exactly, and that's what everybody has to do. You have to think, do I want to, show them with my dollars how I feel about this? You just have to think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do this, or I am going to do this, but I won't do it. That's a decision for you to make.
Mm-hmm. And that ends up being the bottom line. I mean, if this is something you really feel strong about, take the time, go out there, do the research, make your, form your own opinions about everything that we presented and stuff going forward. Because I'm sure that there's more to come on this. This isn't over yet.
Oh yeah, no. This is far from over, I think. Exactly, yeah.
And no matter where you go, this summer for conventions, this is going to be a topic of discussion.
Yeah, I've already been discussing that with my friends. I'm like, Gen Con might be pretty interesting this year.
Well, and remember, Gen Con is not owned by Wizards of the Coast anymore.
Right. No.
So if you think, I'm going to boycott Gen Con, don't do that.
Because
all you're doing is taking money out of the other people's pocket that isn't Wizards of the Coast.
To be honest, WOTC hasn't had anything to do with Gen Con forever. They don't even show up anymore. So
right.
WOTC could care less about Gen Con at this point. So
well, yeah, and that's why that whole separate company was all figured out. You know, it wasn't like in the TSR days where we had a staff of like 4 or 5 people that were specifically devoted to Gen Con.
Peter Atkins is actually who owns Gen Con, if people didn't realize that, but yes.
Yeah, Peter did. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was Hasbro money or
don't know.
It might have been as part of the purchase. I actually don't know. Part of the purchase was that he got to keep Gen Con. Type of thing.
Yeah. So there you go. So I guess that's it. I mean, there's not much more we can say on it.
No, not without speculating more. But I don't necessarily want to do that. I think we've thrown enough question marks out there for people to make their own decisions. But and like Drax said at the beginning of the podcast, does this affect the DDO player? I honestly I don't know. I mean, Patrick and I used to have discussions about how many people that played DDO played tabletop. I mean, that's why we started doing D&D night all those years ago.
Yeah.
Well, but I like to think that people maybe found DDO and then got interested in the tabletop or vice versa, but it's pretty apparent that WOTC's putting their big toe into whatever plans they have for D&D Beyond, and right now it's just affecting the tabletop games. So, but did it affect all these canceled video games? We'll never know.
Yeah.
Unless something else comes out with it. I mean, I heard you and Pineley talking about it, and some of those games sounded kind of cool. And it's like, well, is that going to happen again? But then look at all the tech layoffs right now. So you got 50, 60,000 people that worked at Google and Meta and Amazon and all these other people that are unemployed now because the tech market is kind of pulling back a little bit. So what does that say for our favorite hobby?
Right. We'll see. Stay tuned, as they say, I suppose. All right. Well, I think we have discussed this enough, so we're going to
I think so.
wrap the show up. As I said, thanks for joining us. This was a different podcast. Normally, we do talk about, if maybe this is the first time you're hearing this podcast, we normally talk about DDO at the start of the show. Then we talk about tabletop RPG news, and we talk about board game news. Sometimes we talk about video games, movies, books, comic books, anything geek-wise. So we kind of do it all here, but every once in a while we'll have a show like this where we just hone in on one subject when it demands it, and I think this one definitely demanded it. And thank you, Beaker, for coming on. You put in. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Beaker pretty much did all of the legwork for this show. I created the document, and a couple days later, I looked, and it was like 5 pages, and then it was like 9 pages. And then I'm like, you've been busy.
I mean, this for nerd culture, I think this was even bigger than the bad HBO Velma series that just released.
Oh my God, don't get me started on that. I watched the first episode of that the other day. Oh my God.
Which I think it's running at 4% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Something like that. It's bad. it.
But yeah, so it's like when you thought that Velma was the worst thing to come out of 2023.
Yeah, well, maybe not. Oh dear.
But thank you for having me. I
Always,
felt
anytime.
that this was something. I felt that this is something that the DDO community needed to be aware of. I mean, there are dozens, like you said earlier.
Oh yeah.
Of YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are just pieces of the puzzle as they were happening. So right now you got 2 weeks later type of thing, but it's still not over. So
it's true. So we'll see, definitely. And then you had mentioned earlier, I don't know if you want to mention it again or you want to highlight anything, but you said you did have some stuff over on Drive-Thru RPG.
I do, and I'm in the process of taking it down.
Okay, that's okay.
I will probably retool it for Pathfinder and then release it on Pathfinder Infinite. It's just a couple of small adventures that I did years ago. Boy, I think I mentioned it in our first interview. It's like I miss writing terribly. I just do not have the time.
And we have talked about that because we talk quite a bit, and we have talked about that a lot. That you missed that. So yeah,
I probably wrote 50 or 60 RPG adventures back in the day, and I missed doing that very terribly. So we'll see.
Well,
but my plan is to take those down and put them up in another format somewhere.
Well, you definitely let me know when you do, and I will make sure to link to them. So
I will. Thank you.
People can buy your awesome stuff. All right, we are going to get out of here. We have blabbed on long enough. We do record DDO Players News normally at Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can go to ddoplayers.com/live. Click on that link if you want to join us live to hear that record. Then we do have a sister podcast that covers SSG's other game, which is Lotro. We have Lotro Players News. They record Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Also go to that same link if you want to listen to that show. Because I know some people that do play DDO play Lotro both. There is some crossover since it's both SSG games, but you can join us, as I said, ddoplayers.com/live for that. Until then, stay tuned because as Beaker said a couple times, this ain't over, folks. We don't know how this one's going to end.